Impact of Influence, the Murdaugh family murders. This is the unfolding story of a powerful South Carolina family, the mysterious deaths they are linked to, and our quest to bring you the truth. Hello, friend. Always so grateful you're spending time with us. Much appreciated. I'm Matt Harris. Seton Tucker, that Facebook page is still up and running, is it not?
Yes, it is. It is Impact of Influence.
And we got the other podcast that we're working on with Michael DeWitt, the Wicked South podcast. Please check it out. I think you'll enjoy it. And coming up in about, 9-10 minutes, something like that, we're going to talk to an expert about money laundering, because that's been coming to the forefront again with Alex Murdaugh and the rumors of him maybe gambling, that sort of thing. Where should we begin with the updates on Alex Murdaugh and all that surrounds the Murdaughs?
Well, it appears as if Parker's bid to remove Tinsley and Vox as the attorneys for the Beach family and other of the boaters, that has been denied by Judge Hall again. What
Parker's was doing and what they were claiming to get Tinsley and Vox kicked off the Beach lawsuit was that they had done things that were improper, and the motion said that Tinsley and Vox used improper receipt and review of Parker's privileged documents and information, and they thought Tinsley should be disqualified from the case for its alleged improper disclosure of privileged information and materials and improper communications with a represented person in a related lawsuit. And Parker's attorneys claimed that Tinsley turned the civil action into a multi-front war against Parker's. And in a second suit, Tinsley and Vox sought behind-the-scenes information they said would prove the existence of harassment campaign. Parker's maintains this information holds client, attorneys, and other legal privilege. So Tinsley issued subpoenas to obtain confidential and privileged information about Parker's strategy. They also say that Tinsley contacted witnesses in the case directly, despite the fact that they had legal representation, and convinced them to fire their counsel and disclose information to gather whatever ammunition they can fire at Parker. So that was tossed.
And I think that there was also some question by the Parker's team saying that Tinsley may have to be a witness to some of these things, which would disqualify him. But Judge Hall said the cat's out of the bag. He says, Tinsley can stay on the case. And there's also questions. So now we may see a lot of these confidential documents may come into play during the hearing. So we may get to see exactly what transpired between Parker's trying to do this social media campaign to discredit the Beach family. I think it might be some pretty interesting stuff to look at.
And you mentioned Curtis Vox. It's Tabor Vox, who is one of the attorneys involved with Tinsley in the Mallory Beach wrongful death civil suit. So that's why I don't think you've heard that name very often. We haven't his name has not been out in front as much as Tinsley's.
Well, Tinsley I think he did an interview this week with Andrew Davis from WSAV. He's been out there talking to the media more than Vox has.
This has been going on for 4 years.
Long time.
Since the crash, and it's been pretty heated and ugly between Parker's and Tinsley in the Beach camp.
Well, it looks like they will finally get their day in court, which is set to begin on August 14th in Hampton.
Oh, and prior to the hearing, Alex Murdaugh's deposition will be taken from the jailhouse because he's one of the few remaining people from the lawsuit, because Parker's sued Maggie. Of course, she's deceased, and Paul, who's been driving.
Actually, never sued Paul. I think because Paul probably didn't have any money. But
true, that's right. But I should have said Buster.
Yeah, Buster settled.
Buster settled because it was Paul that used his ID. You're right.
And Tinsley has gone on record that he will not be attending this deposition. I think he says he'll just ask his questions in court.
Because, does he really want to go to jail and sit across from Alex Murdaugh? I guess. Although I would want to be in there. Is that weird? Because I'd like to be watching Alex Murdaugh answer questions.
There's history between those two. I don't know. It could be uncomfortable.
Next, it's the banker buddy of Alex Murdaugh, Russell Lafitte from Palmetto State Bank, who was the accomplice to Alex Murdaugh's multi-million fraud schemes. Sentencing is coming up when?
It is scheduled for August 1st at 10 a.m. in Charleston in front of Judge Gergel. And we should talk about, he was convicted back on November 22nd. So it's been a long time.
Has been. And he's could face, he does face up to 30 years in prison for his crimes. And federal prosecutors argued at trial if he knowingly participated in and profited from fraud and money laundering schemes with Murdaugh. So we shall see how many years he gets.
And he does still have a pending appeal, I believe.
Daily Mail in the UK has an article about an Atlanta film company, some sort of film. There's a working title for it, which is Hot Take Murdaugh Murders. Alex Murdaugh tells the story about wealth, deception, drug addiction, and murder. Again, it's a working title.
It was interesting to me that it said Alex Murdaugh tells a story about wealth, deception, and I don't believe Alex Murdaugh is participating in that. And we've talked about this. No. He couldn't make money off of it if he wanted to. What is the big controversy about this is this casting call. And they say they want featured teens, Caucasian men and women, to portray teens in the photo, 18 to 28, they have their eyes blacked out and it just says teen across it. And those are the boating crash victims. But the big one is they also have a casting call for the featured dead woman, a blonde Caucasian woman to portray dead woman floating in water. And they have Mallory Beach's photo and they have float written across her face in red. And in this casting call, it says this person must be comfortable floating, splashing, etc. in the water. I guess you will make $200 for your appearance in this.
200. Well, that's beside the point. It just, I find it odd if that is true that they had a picture of Mallory with the word float across it. I hope that is, because you never trust the Daily Mail. That's my problem. I'm not ever sure.
Tinsley's quoted heavily in this article. And he says, whoever did put the float over her face knew she was somebody's daughter, that she had died a terrible death.
Yeah.
And he says, she should not be just, hey, we need a pretty young blonde girl to come and splash around and float in the water. And she deserved more respect for that. He goes on to say that he hopes that her parents don't see this insensitive casting call, that it would terrorize them to realize that their daughter had been casually reduced to a prop.
And I don't know enough about casting calls to know how common that is. Is that just a common thing? Anytime they're casting for a movie, they have a picture of something they're looking for and type. I mean, that would be my question.
Well, and Tinsley says in this article, he says, whoever did this really wasn't thinking that these people are real people. And so many times victims get lost in telling the story and that they're just ink on the paper. And he actually mentions that he felt sorry for Maggie and Paul during the trial because he felt like they got lost and they deserved better.
The name of the casting company is Set Life Casting. And again, a lot of things in movies and Hollywood and whatever, Netflix, HBO, whatever. There's a lot of things that are pitched, a lot of things that are go into production that never see the light of day. So we don't know.
Well, Tinsley also kind of talks a little bit about the morality of all this. He says, referring to movies, documentaries, docuseries, he says, I don't know what this says about our society. And he says, my gut is that it's not necessarily a good thing.
There's always been movies made about murders and disasters and things that have happened in the world.
Yeah, people are interested in it. And true crime is, we're in this genre. True crime is something that is interesting for people for one reason or another. But I guess we all need to kind of consider that, yes, this is someone's daughter or sister and those sort of things. You're just a little bit more sensitive towards it.
And that brings us to money laundering time with our guest, Chip Contrell. He advises counsel, corporate clients, and regulators on a range of global asset recovery, asset training matters, regulatory monitorships, sanctions, compliance, grievances, ethics, artificial intelligence, white-collar crimes, and anti-corruption, anti-money laundering issues. He is Chip Contrell. Hey, Chip.
Happy to be here. Good to hear you both.
Seaton?
Well, we've talked about money laundering before, but it's been a while, and we've recently had some reports about some gambling connections and illegal drug connections, so we thought it would be a great time to bring Chip back on, and I think you just mentioned you teach a whole course on this subject.
Yeah, it's It's very interesting, and it can be very intricate, the whole process, as we'll unravel a little bit here in the coming few minutes. But it's an evolving subject that is of great interest to the legal authorities as well as those that want to hide assets.
Uh, so, what basically is money laundering under the law?
It's a process that generally the criminals use in an attempt to hide illegal sources of income. You could pass it through complex transactions or transfers or using a whole bunch of businesses, and we can chat up a little bit about that. But the money is cleaned, and hence the word money laundering, of its illegitimate origin, and make it into like it's a normal business profit, and therefore the money is good, and it isn't tainted, and therefore you don't attach the interest of the tax authorities or necessarily of legal authorities. And by having it in this process, it's meant to be a situation where you can use the money more freely that you've gotten through ill-gotten gains.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that has recently come up is some connections with gambling and Alex Murdaugh. How is gambling used to launder money?
Oh my goodness! I'm going to give you a real simple example. Gambling in its many forms, and it's evolved. Whether or not a lot of people think of gambling just going to casinos, but it's also betting. It is going gambling on e-video games. It's all types of things, and the spectrum that you looked at 10 years ago is a lot different than it is today. But let's talk about casinos, for example. People who take money and have cash go in and buy chips in a casino, and they take in money that they gotten through ill-gotten gains, put it in a casino, play for them a little bit, maybe lose a little money, maybe make a little money, and then when you turn the chips back in, you get the cash, and that cleans the money to a large extent, and you have a trail and a path, because if you do this the way a lot of casinos do it, they track the money that they receive, and they track the money that gets paid back out, and that is really a common way of doing it.
So they go in, they buy, but let's say $100 in chips. Now they don't know what's happening with those $100 of chips, so they can come back and say, I won $50 or whatever it is. And so now they got $150 worth of chips. We don't know how much is clean and how much is dirty. We just know that they had $150 in winnings, and they don't have to.
Yes,
they don't have to declare it. So
they don't have to. They don't have to declare it, Matt. But it's really interesting. If you go, people that gamble a lot get statements, legitimate statements issued either by the state or the casino and the state together, because generally these are state regulated, and these statements will show the money that has been returned to you. They'll show if you hit a jackpot, for example, so that you can pay the proper taxes on it. And this is an example of legitimizing what heretofore might have been dirty money.
They're not going to do it for $25 or something like that, probably, right? I mean,
no,
when you get to the big money, which I would think would make it harder to money launder, because you can't go in there and give me $20,000 in chips without there being a red flag.
Oh, sure you can.
Yeah, you can.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
A red flag being like somebody saying, "Hey, this guy has 20,000."
High roller.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a high roller, and I mean, people, as we're sitting here chatting today, there are people, whether it's Vegas or it's Delaware or one of the other many venues around the country that are using, and around the world that are doing casinos. Cash is very much the biggest part of the way that money changes hands. So people, it's not uncommon to walk in with $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. Now, there is a reporting requirement that certainly these institutions need to follow,
right?
And that would be, so if it's above a certain amount, and it used to be like $10,000, but I think it's like $25,000 or $30,000 now. And so it's really a different scenario than it used to be. But money, cash, is always used. And the cash that you're talking about in many of these instances comes from drug transactions, and people are receiving cash for the drugs, and they're finding a way to legitimize that cash. So one, they can pay for to the suppliers, and also two, so they can use the ill-gotten gains and profits on this for their own purposes.
Take a break to talk about one of our fine sponsors we'll hope you support. Maybe you've been thinking about learning a new language. Well, Rosetta Stone is the most trusted language learning program.
If you're planning to travel internationally and also listen to a lot of true crime, you might think about all of the things that could go wrong while traveling. So learning a new language might make you feel more comfortable. You know how to read signs in case you get lost, or if you need to ask for help.
And you know your husband's very excited to learn. Which language is he going to go after?
I think he's Spanish.
Well, Rosetta Stone is there for him, and it's there for our listeners as well. They offer a lifetime membership. You can buy the program now and get forever access to all the lessons for all the languages and literally never pay a renewal fee.
Don't put off learning that language. There's no better time than right now to get started. For a very limited time, Impact of Influence listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership for 40% off. That's $179 for unlimited access to 25 language courses for the rest of your life. Redeem your 40% off at rosettastone.com/today.
Gifting is hard. This isn't news. But what might be news is that you can now send beer, wine, and spirits right to your friends and family with Drizzly, the go-to app for alcohol delivery.
That's good news, because adult beverages are the only gift that no one ever returns. Love it. And Drizzly's tailored experience lets you find the perfect drink for the occasion, no matter what it is.
You'll save time by shopping a huge selection of drinks from wherever you are.
You'll save money by comparing prices on said drinks across stores, and you'll get to spend more time sipping with your giftees, you know, if they're the sharing type.
Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com. And get your favorite drinks delivered today.
Ding dong! Hello, friend. It's Drizzly! Must be 21 or over. Not available in all locations.
Now, in this case, we don't really have any evidence that Alec was frequenting casinos or anything like that, but there seem to be some loose connections between some of the other people with maybe an illegal gambling den. I don't really see how this could be used to launder money. Could it? And explain it to us.
I am not an expert at this particular aspect, to be sure, but I can tell you that you're right, Seton. On the surface, at least, it would not appear that what Alec had done and what some of the other people that have been alleged to have been included in this circle of his have done for this illegal gambling side. Now, the illegality of gambling doesn't necessarily get in the way of laundering the money. And one of the reasons that can happen is that the illegalities might be that what's legal in the state of Nevada is illegal in the state of South Carolina.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Or what's legal in the state of Delaware is illegal in South Carolina. And this has become a bigger issue. Everything from the online gambling, whether or not you see all of these advertisements in certain states and for gambling on sports betting, right? And you can't do it in certain states, you can't do it in others. That's still considered to be an illegal gambling. And in fact, when gambling in Nevada was was permitted there, but it wasn't essentially anywhere else in the country, you'd find these quote unquote illegal gambling operations where people would take money in various states, and South Carolina, I'm sure, being one, where they were, and then they would forward the money to someone and make the bet in Las Vegas, and through a relatively complicated, but where they use telephones and actual people on the ground there to do that. That would be illegal gambling.
Okay.
It's probably not probably not 20 people sitting around a table playing cards and putting $20,000 on there. That does not equivocate generally to cleaning the money.
Yeah.
But the other situations clearly did.
Do the feds or somebody have an estimate on how much money is laundered a year or however they break it down?
The best numbers that we have are probably 4 and 5 years old, and these are all just guesstimates.
Right, sure.
But it's in the hundreds of billions of dollars, approaching trillions of dollars.
Wow.
Now that's globally.
Right.
That's just globally. That's globally.
Mm-hmm.
And in the United States, I would imagine that there's a lot connected with this, and it goes up and down. One of the biggest issues has been laundering money through real estate, right? So you want to talk about a way to facilitate large amounts of money, and you can talk about billions when, if you look at the property markets in various parts of the world, and you just have to go across the border into Canada to see what the market changes in downtown Vancouver, in downtown Toronto, and downtown Montreal.
I was in Vancouver a few years ago, and it was crazy.
Yes.
There were the amount of every other car was a Lamborghini. It just was.
Really?
Yes, it was really crazy.
Well, part of that is because of the regulations and rules in Canada that permitted this up until reasonably recently, and to allow money to be used to buy assets. And most of it was in real estate because you could spend $10 million. So you've got people with ill-gotten gains, and they are trying to find ways to launder that. But they might bid up the price of a home, and it's nothing for them if they bid it up from $9 million to $20 million, because when they get the $20 million, they're setting a price for this, but also they're helping clean the money when they ultimately sell it, because the sale is considered legitimate. And while there were questions, and up until very recently, you didn't have to prove where you got the money from. And in many jurisdictions, you still don't have to prove where you got the money from. And there's been an awful lot of things north of the 48th parallel in Canada where there has been $20 billion, for example, that came into the Greater Toronto real estate market over the past decade that did not have proper scrutiny. And there have been lots of the same things happen in Vancouver. The same things happen to a lesser extent in New York, but it happened in a big way in London. And a lot of the Russian oligarchs, a lot of Ukrainian oligarchs from the Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, the people that socked money away, and it is also driven up the cost of condominiums and rents in places like these big cities. It's a way that for them to invest the money, because no one knows where it comes from. And the banks, to a certain extent, are complicit in this, because generally you're not going to buy a $10 million piece of property with cash, right?
Yeah.
I'm not.
But some people do.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the three of us aren't, but
Right.
Some people do. So it's a really interesting scenario that groups like the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners and groups like Transparency International, who are really dedicated toward looking at ways of stopping this corruption, and corruption on such a broad level, can be changed.
So that they want to lose money, make money, or get even, because they buy this thing for $20 million in cash, right? So how do they turn it around and get cash back out? They sell it,
but even if they sell it for, let's use this example I just gave. If you've got $20 million worth of dirty money, and you convert that into $10 million of clean money,
gotcha.
You still come out ahead.
Right, way ahead.
And you come out way ahead. And a recent scam that's come up around this are whistleblowers. There's a real concern out there that whistleblowers will turn in somebody, for example, they say that has got a accumulated money, and they've done it in a really bad way. And let's say they have $10 million accumulated that way. So they turn it in. The whistleblower themselves is entitled to a reward for turning that person in if the authorities actually get that money back. And if they get the money back in this instance, and they're turning in a whistleblower for money laundering, there's been a couple of schemes worked where the money that was turned in actually converts into, if the whistleblower gets 20% of the money, so that's $2 million. He's got himself $2 million. So if it's the same guy that actually had the money before, and he just sets up fake companies and all that to get the money cleaned, he ends up with by doing the whistleblowers that he has converted $10 million of bad money into $2 million worth of good money.
Oh, so the whistleblower is only blowing the whistle on himself.
On himself.
I gotcha.
This is cutting edge, and this is part of this recovery and going out and finding the money. But we're seeing this really on an increasing basis, and the authorities are caught in a quandary because do you stop the whistleblowers?
Right.
Probably not.
Right.
But you got to make sure that you understand the background of the money and how it's used, where it's come from, who the whistleblower is. You have to establish a credibility on that. But it's the same kind of thing in any kind of fraudulent activity, and learning how this, and whether or not it's money laundering through the gambling industry, whether or not it's money laundering through real estate or other businesses. Because one of the interesting things is, this would be maybe even more appropriate in South Carolina. You've got businesses like laundromats, you got vending machines, you got restaurants where cash businesses, you got people that cut your grass for cash, and car washes and street vendors and all that. These are often used to launder money. And those may be smaller amounts of money, but it adds up. So there was a series called Ozark, right?
Yep.
And this was right to that. So he laundered money through the motel, whether or not it was the business on that show through motel, and whether or not it was a restaurant, whether or not it was a pub, whether or not it was a mortuary, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I forgot about that.
And a funeral home, right?
Yeah.
So those are legitimate businesses that the money, cash was coming in, and it's exceptionally hard to figure out the background of that money and how it was used. And by the way, if you do it in the right way, including you had a casino. Remember, they had the casinos on that
riverboats.
show.
Yep.
All of that was based on that fact. That was, although it was a fictitious set of broad circumstances for the show, but it was all based on factual opportunities that legitimate businesses were used for money laundering campaigns. And so you had guys coming in and getting more chips on the casino boats, or whether or not it was they were buying all kinds of new carpet for the floor.
Yep.
And for the floors, the example, and
Yeah.
they just paid more money for that carpet, and then they used that money to better it. So
Yep.
businesses like this, and you can see it. You drive down the street, and I constantly do this. My wife jokes with me. I said, those guys, they never have any people there.
I always think that about the mattress
at
stores.
that restaurant.
Yes.
Mattress stores. I'm like, well, I've never seen anyone in these mattress stores, but we have one on every corner.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah, and how it's processed.
Well, let me ask you this. Would it surprise you, we've talked about all this money that's missing. Would it surprise you if businesses like this or real estate was being used to launder money in Alex Murdaugh's case?
Not at all. And because, the probabilities, given the multitude of other things that we're hearing about coming out, and one of your guests, not just a couple of weeks ago, was saying that, this is like the gift that continues to give in terms of thought, thinking of ways. And I still think we're just scratching the surface in some of this. Now, the authorities probably know an awful lot more than we're hearing still at the moment, but it would not surprise me in the least. He was familiar with these schemes. and whether or not he used those monies in offshore ventures, which I know have been talked about a little bit. We haven't heard an awful lot about that just yet, and I think there's still more that we're going to be getting from the government and from some of these processes as part of the investigative disclosures as more and more charges are raised. This is not over by any stretch of the imagination, and I'd be actually candidly surprised given what the fact patterns that we've had, particularly in the last 8 to 10 months, around the movement of the money.
Good. Anything else, Seaton?
No, I think that was really interesting and informative. Is there anything you think we've missed?
Oh, hey, I'm happy to come back.
There you go. That's how it works.
If there is something. But no, I don't think so. This is really a topic that a lot of the investigators, I've been a forensic investigator since 1977, and it has been a career that I've seen evolve as technologies evolved, as other things such as social media, as communications evolve. But getting out in front of the criminals, because one of the things that is the hardest thing for the legitimate businesses as well as for the officials and the law enforcement is to stay out in front of this. And a lot of times they're playing catch up. So I think with technologies, we're seeing this get a little bit better. South Carolina, the FBI, a lot of these, because these things cross state lines more often than not, you're going to have the federal government involved in investigators. You're going to get a lot more bits and pieces that would be there as opposed to be covered up or actually totally unable to come up. But thanks for the opportunity. I really
Chip.
appreciate it. And thanks for all you guys are doing. I continue to enjoy the series very much.
Well, thank you for coming on. And it sounds like we will probably have an opportunity to talk to you again in the future.
Yes. Yeah, probably right.
Okay.
Thanks, Chip.
All right. Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And Seaton, you got a couple of comments for us.
Yeah, just a really nice review on Apple. It says, it's regarding the Collier Landry episode. It says, I've listened since day one, and each episode is better than the previous. I especially enjoyed the Collier Landry interview. He provided some great insight and perspective on Buster, and I'm also glad y'all are bringing awareness to him and how he's been impacted in all of this. Thank you for your unbiased work and all of this reporting, all sides of your cases.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. We always love your comments. Good, bad, or indifferent. We take them on and try to get better. Yes, Seaton.
Yeah, we had one because we had a little bit of a mess up in our description. So we thank you for pointing that out. And
some spelling. Yeah,
yes.
I was hurried. I'm a dummy. I wrote like who's instead of who's or something. Yeah,
it gave us 4 stars, but thank you for giving us 4 stars, not 1.
Yeah, we blew it. All right. So, Matt Harris podcast at gmail.com. Impact of Influence podcast on Facebook, and check out the latest podcast effort that Seaton and Michael DeWitt are doing called The Wicked South. And we'll talk soon, friend.